Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And it's all real, it all happened, and it's all now to play for on both sides of the House of Commons, of course. There are battles underway, turmoil perhaps around the corner. The Labour Party desperately trying to hold itself together despite having almost a complete clear out of the shadow cabinet due to resignations and the sacking of Hilary Benn. The Conservative leadership battle will be bloody, and it hasn't really begun yet. But we'll begin by talking about the events on Thursday, the result on Friday, and I almost, for the very first time since we started talking to each other every morning, I almost don't know where to start. So confusing and so potentially difficult is this territory. So let's start by making the obvious observation, which I've made several times in the course of the campaign, which is there were a billion reasons to vote to leave the European Union that had nothing to do with xenophobia or racism. A billion, a gazillion, countless, millions, loads and loads and loads of them, okay? It is also true to say that over the course of the weekend we have seen some things that are deeply troubling, okay? But we have not seen compelling evidence that this affects some sort of sea change in British society. The footage I've most recently been shown is of a protest outside a mosque in Birmingham. Quite what that has to do with the European Union will confuse all those people who cast their vote to leave without a racist or a xenophobic bone in their body. But it will not confuse those of us who worried that a vote to leave might embolden the ugliest underbelly of Britain. And there is evidence that it has. What we don't know is how big that underbelly is. A mile from my front door, there was a racist graffiti attack upon a Polish cultural centre that was actually founded partly in recognition of the contribution made to the Second World War by Polish Spitfire pilots. You want evidence of just how mad things have become? Chew on that for a while.
But a worrying insight first, with news that reports of race hate crimes have risen since the referendum. There are mounting allegations of racist and xenophobic graffiti and verbal abuse. So for some people who've lived here all their lives, Britain now feels rather unwelcome, even unsafe. And I should warn you, there is racially offensive language in this report by Porrick O'Brien.
East London on Friday morning. A minicab driver swears at a man in a VW Golf trying to pass. Then that person starts racially abusing the taxi driver.
Speak proper English then.
The question, is this sort of thing more likely to happen after the referendum result? At West London's Polish Cultural Centre, they're answering that question with a resounding yes. On Saturday, and for the first time in nearly 50 years, the building was daubed with a racist slogan.
Thank you. Thank you.
There are many of us who are really glad the Poles are here.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's...
We're honoured that you're here.
Thank you so
While we were there, a man arrived with more flowers and an emotional show of support.
Thank you very
Excuse me,
much.
sir.
Thank
Can you just tell us why you've come?
Well, I've come to support the Poles because I think they've had a really bad time of it, because the Poles are great people and I've always admired them, and they integrate well. They're just fantastic people.
As well as the incident at the centre, police are also investigating the fact that these laminated cards were found near a school in Huntingdon, Cambridgeshire. Multiple examples are being posted online, and it's not just anecdotal. 85 race hate incidents were reported to the National Police Hate Crime website between Thursday and Sunday, up from 54 on the same days last month. There's also been reported racial abuse directed at people who voted to leave, of course. The Prime Minister addressed the overall issue today.
We will not stand for hate crime or these kinds of attacks. They must be stamped out.
That's the big picture. Racism, though, an intimate, personal affair. On Sunday, a man slowed down, then accelerated as Nisha Party was at a zebra crossing.
Kind of step back and just kind of raise my arms to go, "What are you doing? Did you not see me?" And then he just shouted the P word out of his window, And it was clear to me that that was probably the reason why he didn't want to stop for me. You know, I was definitely called those kind of names when we were growing up, but I haven't been called that for a good 30 years. So it doesn't feel to me like it's a coincidence.
The referendum, it would seem, has given a minority an excuse to voice latent hatred. But also, at the Polish centre, a chance for others, in turn, to voice something else.
You want evidence of something even madder? This petition, which is more of a sort of howl of protest, I think, than a reasonable political proposal. Do you know who it was set up by? This petition that's got more than 3 million people calling for a second referendum. Just when you think things can't get any madder, you find out that petition was actually set up a month ago by a Leave campaigner who thought he was going to lose. So the petition that over 3 million people have piled in on calling for a second referendum was set up by someone from the other side who thought he was going to lose. It gives you an indication, I think, of just how insane things are feeling at the moment. There was only one prominent campaigner on the Leave side who even floated the possibility of having a rerun of the referendum. Needless to say, when I tell you that that was Nigel Farage, you'll know that he will by now have already said the polar opposite of what he said back then. And it's not just him, of course. This is Boris Johnson on May the 23rd. The system has spun out of control. If you vote in on the 23rd of June, you are kissing goodbye permanently to control of immigration. This is Boris Johnson on June the 26th. It is said that those who voted Leave were mainly driven by anxieties about immigration. I do not believe that is so. Same man, same year, same subject. Completely different contributions. So no wonder we are a little bit confused and a little bit worried. I don't think either of us have got the right to tell each other what we can feel at the moment. I don't think you've got the right to tell me to feel more upbeat or more positive. I certainly don't think I've got the right to tell you to feel more downbeat or more frightened. I think we can respect each other's right to move on when we feel like it, can't we? We can respect each other's right to express a view in a liberal democracy, for now, that may be at odds with somebody else's. I don't think we can expect each other to agree on every single subject, but I don't think that we can really close our eyes and stick our fingers in our ears and pretend that everything is going to be okay. Best case scenario right now, we have a period of pretty serious turmoil and economic difficulty, at the end of which we might, if we're lucky, be just about as well off as we were before. But we'll have these other things that I completely understand people really care about, like sovereignty and control. I don't know. I guess it's a question really ultimately of whether or not they, on one side of the scales, outweigh all the stuff that may happen on the other side. But we don't know. We don't know. And if I could flick a switch, and a few of you were kind enough to get in touch over the weekend saying, I hope you can make me feel better on Monday morning. I can't. If I could flick a switch and somehow mainline optimism, somehow mainline positivity, get some sort of, I don't know, medical intervention that allowed us just to be more glass half full than glass half empty, then I would bite your arm off. I absolutely would. There is a billion questions, absolute billion questions we could ask now that would be worthy of answers. But I think it's still time. It's still time to just take stock of the situation. I really don't like this narrative out there at the moment telling everyone to shut up and move on. If you stick a Winnie the Pooh picture on my Facebook page, you are dead to me. Piglet says we can still be friends. People are frightened and furious. Having a pop at someone on Facebook that you're cross with is not the same as spitting at someone in the street because they're brown or putting excrement through their letterbox because they're Polish. You being upset because some friends of yours have been cross to you on Facebook, that's not what it feels like when you turn up at school and you're Romanian and someone's written on the toilet wall, go home to Romania. It feels very, very different when someone's standing yards away from you in the street as you go to prayers at your mosque and they're screaming that you're a Pakistani paedophile who must go home tomorrow. It doesn't matter that you reply, I was born at a hospital a mile and a half away. They are there. And I pray, like everybody else with a conscience in this country prays, that they are small and they will go away again. But I can't sit here in front of you today and say that I'm confident they will. I'm not going to. How dare anybody suggest that we should be quiet about our concerns or our fears? The whole point of this whole debate was that people's concerns and fears hadn't been properly articulated or addressed. And now we're turning around within, 72 hours of the result and telling everybody who is feeling a little bit bruised that their concerns and fears should be forgotten and overcome. Just think for a minute how mad that is. You've got concerns, you've got fears, I want to hear them. I really do. We also need to talk about the Labour Party, and we also need to talk about the hate that may or may not be just exerting something a little bit more like a stranglehold on parts of the country than it was before. But let's just begin with the rearview mirror. You hear what I said about optimism a minute ago? I think that you would be my holy grail caller today, actually. You voted to remain. You were disappointed by the result, but you've had the weekend to take stock. You've had a couple of days to have a look at the situation. I don't think it's controversial of me to suggest you'll have to either manage to interpret in a very novel way or avoid it altogether most of the economic forecasts, most of the predictions of jobs moving out of the city pretty soon, most of the responses from other financial leaders, other big business people. You don't have to take what they say as gospel, but I don't think you can pretend they haven't said it. So, if you fall into that category, call me now, sell me some of that optimism, give me some of that positivity. And if you've done it the other way around, 0345 6060 973 is the number you need, just to tell me why you've paused now, what it is that you've suddenly woken up to that perhaps you hadn't taken into account properly before you cast your vote. I'm not going to stress this point because the kind of people who are determined not to hear it never will. But there were a billion reasons. The second most viral clip I did last week was the one in which I explained at some length why there were a billion reasons to vote to leave the European Union that had nothing to do with loathing thy neighbour or racism or xenophobia. But you cannot escape the fact that people who do subscribe to those rather rancid schools of thought are walking around with a spring in their step at the moment. We can all agree on that, right? But we can also agree that your friend, your father, your brother-in-law, your sister, your uncle, whoever it may be that voted in a way you don't like, they are not full of hate and bile and xenophobia. They might, however, be full of remorse. I don't know. We'll find out. 12 after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The phone lines are open. You'll understand that we're going to be covering a lot of ground in the coming days, but it may begin to look a little familiar after a while. I'll take your advice and my own judgment on when it's time to talk about other matters, but at the moment it's the domestic political situation that fascinates on an almost... No, scratch almost. It's the domestic political situation that fascinates on an unprecedented scale in my living memory. Magda is in Redbridge. Magda, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, I'm Polish and I voted in, but actually I'm really happy with the result because...
Oh, fantastic.
You see,
come here, sit down. Take half the studio. I need you to talk to me.
I'm happy with the result because it brought up to the surface things that were brewing under, and I was never disillusioned that actually people are happy with all the immigration that happened, from Eastern Europe. Obviously, it's scary. I see communities, I talk to people as well because I work in a school, and people are worried about the numbers. So no wonder they voted out. I voted in because I was worried about the finances of the country. See,
but when you have Boris Johnson today and Daniel Hannan, one of the prominent Leave campaigners last week, who's taken a leave of absence, both of them effectively saying, well, if you're expecting a massive fall in immigration, you're going to be disappointed. I mean, that quote that I read a minute ago from Boris Johnson when he said on, let's get the dates right, May the 23rd, the system has spun, hang on, I want people to hear this in case they missed it. This is May the 23rd, Boris Johnson, the system has spun out of control. If you vote in on the 23rd of June, you're kissing goodbye permanently to control of immigration. They're the people you're describing. They're the concerns that you're reflecting. And then yesterday, on June the 26th, it is said that those who voted leave were mainly driven by anxieties about immigration. I do not believe that is so. Everybody believes that is so, don't they? Everybody believes that concerns about immigration were the biggest engine on the Leave side, rightly or wrongly.
Not the only one.
No, not the only, by any stretch of the imagination, but the biggest.
Definitely. But you see, I think if we didn't vote, if we stay, people would be even angrier. We need to deal with it.
Yeah,
the government got the message that actually there's something wrong. People are really unhappy. You've got to listen to us.
But they're going to be even more unhappy. They're going to be even more unhappy if it turns out that actually we were never really promising to do it at all.
We're out. So it's the ball's in their court. They won't be able to blame it on EU. That the immigration is not controlled. They have to deal with it.
They'll just blame it on immigrants instead.
They might, but at least there's hope. There is hope that things will change, and I hope that finances will get sorted because pound's gone up. And of course, it's been a major shock to the system. It's been a major shock to the country, to Europe, to the world. So you can't.
I don't want to rain on your parade. I really don't. But when you hear of the situation in Cambridgeshire, where laminated cards saying "Polish vermin go home" have been put through letterboxes, and at primary schools.
Events. I mean, have you seen the sign on that Polish centre? You can't really tell what it was. You don't know who wrote those signs. I'm not saying that they were fake, but I work with wonderful people, and I've been surrounded by wonderful people who actually there isn't that much racism, and I'm pretty much the only Polish person here. There's a variety of nationalities, but I live in Havering. Can you believe that? 70% voted out, and I live in Havering, and yet I'm not worried. I'm not worried because actually people voted for genuine reasons, not because they're racist or xenophobe. They voted because they're worried about the country. They're worried about what's happening in Europe. They're worried about...
But they're worried about people like you.
They probably are. But it's my job.
And my question then becomes, should they be? Because we've just changed the course of our country's future because they're worried about people like you. My position has always been they probably shouldn't be as worried as they are.
You see, I've worked here for 14 years and I've never taken benefits. Many people have never taken benefits who come from Poland, and many of Eastern Europeans haven't, but many have. Many cheat the system. So it's important to identify those and get rid of them. Sort out
I envy your optimism, and I aspire to sharing it, but I suspect I am more exposed to the things that worry me than you have been. Please God it stays that way. 10:17 is the time. And just in case you think I'm exaggerating, I'll just seriously, without even pausing to bother, here you go. Dear James, you are bitter and secretly want a sexual relationship with an immigrant. Please can you stop throwing your toys from your pram? We're coming out of the EU as was fairly decided. The doom and gloom you spread affects the market. You have utter contempt for me, but also an epically high opinion. You think I affect markets? I'm just describing things that are happening in this country at the moment. I want to be like Magda. At the moment, I'm not. You don't get to tell me that I have to be. It's 10:17. It's the backtracking that is so worrying, isn't it? It's the reverse ferreting that's going on everywhere, whether it's the obvious reverse ferrets that you could have predicted from a million miles away, like Mr. Farage saying if it's 52-48, we'll have to have another one. But then it was 52-48 the other way round, and we absolutely can't have another one. I mean, the proper politicians, they're backtracking. The people who perhaps you expected more from. Daniel Hannan, the MEP, who was very impressive throughout the campaign, but was saying before the end of last week that anyone expecting big falls in immigration is going to be disappointed. Boris Johnson doing a similar turnaround, stoking up the control issue in the run-up to the ballot, and then almost as soon as it was delivered, suggesting that actually the numbers might not be that drastically changed. That's going to leave everybody cross. I mean, that's lose-lose, isn't it? If you passionately feel that your quality of life has been compromised by the presence here of too many Eastern European people, and it turns out they don't reduce the numbers, you're going to be furious. And then everybody on the other side who absolutely rejects the notion that the problems this country has brought upon itself were caused by recent arrivals rather than the powermongers and the plutocrats, they're going to be disappointed, furious and upset as well. It's the backtracking. The 350 million quid that Ian Duncan Smith said yesterday was an extrapolation. An extrapolation. I've heard it described as an aspiration as well. It was never apparently a promise. All of these numbers that were thrown around were apparently just, rough guides, aspirations. And that's really worrying. Regardless of what side of the debate you were on, it's really worrying because they were actual claims that were made rather than apocalyptic predictions. Actual claims. We will do this. We will regain control. We will have this money. We will tell you the sum. It's 350 million quid. We'll stick it on the side of a bus. Now, I grant you, extrapolation is a very long word. Maybe they couldn't find room for it on the side of the bus. But I've seen pictures of Ian Duncan Smith giving interviews in the shadow of that bus with that number written on it in 10-foot high letters. A number that they're now telling us, oh, no. It boils down, when you think about it, to what they think of the voters. And for me, that's where Rupert Murdoch's role was so interesting. I don't know if you saw pictures this weekend of Rupert Murdoch with Donald Trump up in Scotland, but he was. And he sent his two main papers in opposite directions. So the newspaper that is, in, I think, fair comment to say, aimed more at the sort of educated sections of society, the Times, that went down the Remain route, and the newspaper that is perhaps unfairly regularly associated with the less educated sections of society, the Sun, that went down the Leave route. It was almost as if he thought, well, I can flog that to them, but I'd never get away with it with that lot. And now the politicians that are seeking his anointment are retreating from precisely the points that won them votes in the first place. I'll just shut up and listen. Actually, I do apologise. It was a long weekend. I've had a bit of a log jam, a bit of a verbal log jam over the course of the weekend by not wanting to have these conversations outside of the studio, because you never know quite where they'll lead. Catherine is in Suffolk. Catherine, we're looking for reasons to be cheerful.
Good morning. Well, there's lots of reasons to be cheerful. I mean, we do live in a very affluent society still. I voted Remain, and so I was, I did spend the day with my bottom lip trailing around on the floor and full of doom and gloom. But when I looked at how many people actually turned up to do the vote, it was the highest proportion of people that have ever voted. And in parts of the country, on council estates, there was the largest turnout ever. And so this is because people really felt that their vote counted. And so something to take from this is perhaps that people are now beginning to become a little bit more politically engaged, and so that the promises that were made and the various claims and extrapolations that have turned out to be lies need to be addressed. And can we really seriously even consider Boris Johnson as a Prime Minister when he has been seen to be campaigning on lies?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting analysis of optimism, the idea that we've got lots and lots of people who are politically engaged and they're about to get the mother of all wake-up calls about how trustworthy the people they voted were for. I don't know that it works like that, does it? Most people who were shouting about the lies from the rooftops got ignored, and they'll just continue to get ignored, won't they? I mean, Boris has done a complete 180-degree volte-face, complete. He's now saying immigration wasn't the main reason why people voted to leave. Actually, you can say immigration was the reason I voted to leave. It doesn't make you racist. It might make you wrong. You might not be able to point at precisely these areas of society that you think are set to improve, but I could see it the other way around, Catherine. You've got millions of people who've been empowered and compelled to vote for reasons that turn out to be bogus. That could cause all manner of problems in the future. The easiest of which, the easiest to cope with of which would be disengagement, following on from the engagement. Ian's in Welling. Ian, what would you like to say?
Hi there. I voted to leave, and I'm not regretting that at the moment. But I feel sort of generally both optimistic and pessimistic at the same time, which is kind of weird.
It's kind of human, I suppose.
Well, the reason that, without going into it in massive detail, the reasons I voted to leave were nothing to do with immigration. I don't really have a problem with free movement of people. I actually run a company that has most of our employees in Spain. So I'm going backwards and forwards around Europe all the time.
Aren't you worried that might change?
No, I'm pretty convinced it won't change. I mean, we never, even before the EU, we never required a visa to go to France or Spain or anywhere else in Europe. But, I also travel regularly to the US, Israel and Switzerland, none of which are in the EU, although Switzerland has some agreement.
I was thinking more about the employment situation than the actual travel situation.
No, not at all. I mean, the way that we incorporate the company is that we have a US company, a UK company, and a Spanish company, and they're all.
Fair enough. Yes, which is what the banks are going to have to do. The banks that are based here are going to have to find another base, aren't they, in a European Union country, so they can continue.
Well, it depends
doing what you do.
But that's still, without getting into that. But the thing is, I feel that what we did, and the reason that I voted to leave is because I thought there were a number of issues that have been going back for many years, right the way back to what happened to the fishing industry, the farming industry, tin mining in Cornwall, and all sorts of other issues where the EU, the structure of the EU, and the intention of the EU didn't do our economy or our working people any favours or whatsoever. In fact, quite the opposite. And as a result of that, what happened was that our government simply didn't have the tools to address it. And we saw that with the issues in the steel industry, where EU rules stopped them from doing, if it had been a Labour government, they would have been stopped from subsidising the steel industry. Now, whether our government wanted to or not is irrelevant. The point is, we couldn't have done it. So I think what we've done is we've handed our government the tools to fix a lot of these issues and to focus their policies on what the UK needs, whichever colour of government it is. The reason that I'm slightly pessimistic is because I don't have that much faith in our politicians' ability to take those tools and use them. I think for many, many years we're going to be working through a kind of a backlog of people who are interested in the political system and who will become our politicians in the future, whose mindset is still very much in the EU mindset. And my worry is that whatever trade agreements that we come up with simply won't be any better than the ones we have at the moment. I mean, I read the...
But they could be worse as well, couldn't they?
Well, they could. Well, debatable. I mean, as part of...
Is it really debatable? I mean, in terms of what the European Union will do in the face of other countries contemplating what happens to us, the idea that they will do anything that makes us look better off than we were before, they might as well just call time on the whole project.
Well, no, but you're assuming that I'm talking about trade deals with the EU. Right? So, as part of my attempt to educate myself and not listen to politicians telling me what's going to happen, I read the Canadian trade deal, and I've got to tell you it was hard work, right? I don't want to be a trade negotiator, thanks very much, but that trade deal is great for German manufacturing. It's not bad for French farming. It's pretty terrible for our financial services. In fact, financial services are largely excluded from that trade deal. Now, I would hope that when we do our replacement trade deal with Canada, it'll focus on what we're good at and what we need and what they need, and actually the agreement between the two parties will be a lot better.
And I guess the response to that from some people would be, but Canada were motivated to sign a trade deal with 500 million people. Their motivation to put their legwork in for a trade deal with a tenth of that number is not going to be the same. And I think it took 8 years, didn't it?
So the Canadian Prime Minister, I think, was the first one to come out and said that he wanted to build a new relationship with the UK. So I think they are motivated.
No, I'm not suggesting they're not motivated. I'm just suggesting it took 8 years to sign that one with the EU, and that was when they had 500 million potential customers at the other end of the phone.
The clue is it took 8 years to sign it with the EU. Now, remember, to sign a trade deal in the EU, all 28 countries had to approve it, which is why TTIP hasn't been signed, because the Italians are blocking it.
Probably never will.
Precisely. So why? So if you think, it took 8 years to get 28 countries to agree to a trade, or 29 including Canada, to agree to a trade deal.
No, it took 8 years to get to the point where they could show 28 countries something they could agree with or disagree with. I mean, the trade deal, as you said yourself, the complicated bit is in the negotiation. Then you take it to the table and see who will agree or disagree with it. So we let's say it takes us 5 years or 4 years.
Yeah, so you're right.
What happens in the meantime?
Well, there are two options, aren't there? I mean,
I've got to go to the news. It's 10:32, Ian. We'll talk again, I can tell. I look forward to it. In a way, we're just sort of taking the temperature of the conversation at the moment, but I'm focusing in particular upon, what would you call it, reservations, changes of mind. I think it was an original observation, an original quote. It's a bit of a figure of speech that I employ quite often. There's no point having a mind if you never change it. If you voted to remain in the European Union and you've seen the dust settle a little bit, you understand why we shouldn't be panicking about the fact that shares in Barclays have been temporarily suspended after falling pretty rapidly this morning. All right, okay, there's going to be problems, it's not going to be easy, but do you know what? I'm up for this. 0345 606 0973. If conversely, and there was a lot of this emerging over the weekend, but I think it's important when you do what I do for a living to try and work out where the line is between anecdote and evidence, if you like. So there were certainly people, you heard them on this radio station, you heard them on this programme, you saw them on the telly, who were reviewing their vote. I don't know how we are supposed to get an academic overview of how many of them there are. This petition, which I think is a howl of upset rather than a meaningful legislative or political instrument. It is not, has it, been signed by 3.5 million people who voted to leave the European Union and now wish that they could go back and change their mind. It has presumably been signed by an unknown number in that category, but a massive majority of people who are just sort of not sore losers necessarily. That's a slightly unkind analysis of them, but just absolutely convinced that the country's gone down the wrong route and are now desperately trying to get a hand back on the steering wheel. It doesn't make them bad or undemocratic or in denial. It just makes them scared and deeply concerned. 10:36 is the time. In the next hour, we'll ask whether you think Jeremy Corbyn should now walk the plank for the good of the country or the good of the party. I understand that he has been told by the deputy leader, Tom Watson, that he's likely to face a leadership challenge. More on that to come. And we'll also look at the reports of a sort of escalating race-based anger on the streets that I think some people, possibly wearing rose-tinted glasses, thought, well, if we vote to leave, then surely all of these people in that category will calm down for a while. It may just be that the vote to leave has thrown petrol upon the fire of those sort of fears and hatreds. We'll find out. 10:37 is the time. Anissa is in Brixton. Anissa, what would you like to say?
Well, James, I'm not happy with the idea that we should roll over and just sort of get on with things. I'm deeply concerned. I mean, I voted to remain. And the reason being that we should be thinking about it is that, let's face it, the whole idea of the referendum was a construction by a minority of right-wingers. And we've basically fallen into the trap and gone along with it.
You see the problem here already. I'm sorry.
Wait, let me complete. Let me finish.
Okay.
What my issue is that they've to run a very divisive campaign and work on the vulnerabilities of people, the most vulnerable people, and get them to be honest. The reality is that those people will be hardest affected by the outcomes of what's happening. So it's a complete disaster. Any way we look at it, for those people who voted to leave. They've been hoodwinked. We all have been hoodwinked, and we've gone along with it. And even the conversation today, we've got to have this conversation about what the outcome means. I mean, it's a complete disaster. That's the reality. And any way we look at it, all of the issues with the EU, yes, they're all up for negotiation, and they should be up for negotiation within the EU. And look at Theresa May has come out strongly to say we should remove ourselves from the European Commission of Human Rights. I mean, this is the agenda that was driving all of this. The worst thing possible is to become a backward society, and this is why we're leading. That's the reality, and we've worked on the vulnerabilities of people, and that is really unfortunate.
What is it that we in London miss? Because it's tempting to put a gloss on it all, focusing on immigration inevitably, saying, well, we've got more of it than anyone else and we're less bothered by it than anyone else. But you clearly don't see that reflected in other communities. You head out of London and you find that people who are deeply concerned about the issue, despite often, not always, but often not being particularly affected by it. I don't know how I really don't know how you argue with them, because they'll say, well, look, I saw something on Channel 4 last week. It was awful. A bloke got a council house. I read the Daily Mail last month. It's absolutely awful. There's 10 of them on one street. I saw this, I saw that. I've been on social media. How do you address their concerns without patronising them?
Yes, I think that's very true, and I think those are legitimate concerns. And I think we need to find a way of addressing those concerns, but not at their own expense. And this is what's happened. They're vulnerable people, and they've been overlooked, and they have spoken. But the problem is that, people were not connected to the politicians and whoever were not connected with those people, and that's a problem. But there should have been another way of raising it, not this way.
And the politicians who perhaps should have been making that connection will be among the politicians we discuss in the next hour when we turn our attention to Jeremy Corbyn's current tribulations. We're looking for, if you like, reasons for, not regret, but reasons for review. Just to sort of, I thought I was voting on these grounds, or I thought this was going to happen. I'm beginning to wonder whether or not I might have called it wrong. Either way round. Pascal writes, I worked with an Italian who has been here for 20 plus years. He is petrified. The people have spoken, and I can see why an Italian might have concerns. A big worry for me, some of the footage doing the rounds at the weekend. Again, it goes viral so quickly. A young woman saying, my whole family voted to leave and we'd like to go back and do it again. But it was the bloke in Burnley, I think, who said, I voted to leave the European Union to stop all the Syrians coming here. And you just sort of thought, Okay. I mean, that vote is worth the same as anybody else's, but the argument was we'll take fewer people from the European Union and more people from other countries. They might well turn out to be brown. He's not going to be very happy either. Rory's in Bristol. Rory, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think the main thing that kind of worried me is when we actually come to negotiate our exit, it's going to come down to between kind of two choices. Boris Johnson's already come out and said that we're going to stay in the European single market. I think essentially if we don't have access to the European single market, we're going to be facing an enormous recession.
And if we get it, we need freedom of movement, right?
Yeah, and exactly.
Probably. I don't know. I mean, it's all up for grabs. But if he brings back a deal that involves freedom of movement, all bets are off, aren't they?
Yeah, and well, it then goes against then you think, what's the point of having the referendum? There's so much anger about immigration, and I think it was Magda was saying, we always the hope that this would get addressed.
Yes.
Essentially, it wouldn't. We have a choice between an enormous recession that would hurt the people that are supposed to leave, or we have to say, actually, to get the economics and the finances, we have to take the immigration, and then we're back where we started with having a referendum that's been incredibly divisive
because of the wonderful things he does. Because the immigration dragon can never be slayed. That's the problem. If you have allowed it to go unchecked, that every single time you've got to wait 20 minutes or 2 hours to see a doctor, it's because of immigration. Every single time you read absolutely baseless anecdotal claims about kids not having school places. It's actually illegal. It's illegal for a child not to be provided with a school place by the local authority. It's against the actual law. It's an offence, but it doesn't matter. Every single time you read a story like that, you're cross. Every time you see someone who appears to be Eastern European driving a nicer car than you, all of these things, they don't go away now. You don't get this genie back in the bottle.
And I mean, I work for the NHS, and I've just finished night shifts this morning, and the NHS wouldn't function without the great immigrants that we have there. And you kind of think, well, I see it every day that the NHS is struggling, but I feel, well, yes, it's underfunded, but who made the decision to underfund it? Everything's been blamed on immigrants.
In 2010, we had the highest approval ratings in the history of the National Health Service.
And what happens in 5 years' time when the country's having an enormous recession and we have no one to blame? What then? Where do people's anger get turned to?
Well, they should blame the people that have been telling them fibs over the course of the last couple of months, but they won't, will they?
And only then will we kind of realise that actually maybe we were sold lies or mistruths to get us to vote out, and only then, once it's too late, will people realise. And it's again the people that are most at risk of losing everything that are going to suffer are going to be the people that left.
But even if you look at the areas of this country that got the highest amount of funding from the European Union, your point assumes an even more profound air, particularly Wales and Cornwall, oddly. I probably remiss of me not to have been more across this before, but when you break down where the money goes that we get, it goes to the areas that voted most passionately to leave. And it's not hard to work out why, because they're the poorest areas, which is why the money goes there. And the European Union can make these decisions based upon comparative financial situations. A domestic government bases these decisions upon where, well, to be plain, where the seats are most marginal, where opening a new hospital or a new factory is going to help, where sticking in some infrastructure investment is more likely to win a seat for someone in your party. That's how Westminster decide what to do. Brussels, it seems, for all their myriad faults, made the decisions based very simply on where poverty was greatest and need was highest. Back to business in hand, most obviously. The dust, that's far from settled, has it? But it's a little bit more settled than it was the last time we met on Friday. I'm just wondering where you stand now with regard to how you voted and how things have panned out. Any regrets? Oh, I knew I'd get that wrong. It's a stupid word. I'm never going to use it again. Any regrets, reservations? Any reasons to be cheerful when on Friday you were perhaps feeling anything but? Facebook, I don't know if you're on it. Facebook's full of fights at the moment. It's very dispiriting. It seems to me to be full of people who voted to leave the European Union and spent the weekend wondering whether actually that was in their best interests after all, and now they're getting really, really cross with people who keep posting evidence that it might not have been in their best interests after all. If I see that ludicrous Winnie the Pooh meme about Piglet and Pooh staying friends again, there will be violence. 10:49 is the time. Johnny's in Stanmore. Johnny, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning. I'm thinking actually that these individuals who do some crime on the Polish, the card, I mean, these are anonymous people. It's a crime. It's illegal, okay? Now...
I'm going to move on to that after 12 o'clock. I'm looking at the moment more at whether or not you've had a sort of recalibration of feelings since the vote was cast.
Look, I would remain a supporter voter, and if it would come to a referendum, I most probably would change to leave. And I'll tell you why.
Yes, go on.
Because when I voted to remain, it was just based on the economy. I really didn't want, to damage jobs and other people. But if it happened already, and what happened now, we're out and the economy, we can see it's already recovering, I would go for out. And let me explain you this, because I hate the kind of attitude from these over 3 million people undermining democracy. But when I voted,
they don't undermine democracy.
Well,
they're just expressing unhappiness with a decision. I mean, crikey, there's never been a ballot in the history of the world where people on the losing side weren't unhappy. It doesn't undermine democracy. And if it turns out there's been a lot of lying, there is a case for saying, well, actually, I voted because I thought we were going to get 350 million quid a week spent immediately on hospitals. Turns out that's not true. Therefore, I'd like to vote again. I voted because I thought we were going to reduce immigration by X numbers by next Tuesday, and it turns out that wasn't. So if you've cast your vote on a false premise that was sold to you by a prominent campaigner, it is not undemocratic to contemplate the possibility of having another go. It might be unrealistic, but it's not undemocratic.
It is, because I'll explain why. Because after every single election, every voter would be able to tell you, you know what, he said so, he didn't do what he said.
Yes, but this isn't an election. This isn't an election with lots and lots of different policies and lots of different areas. This is a referendum with one question to which your answer will have been based on a variety of issues. And if it turns out that the most prominent of them were bogus, it couldn't be more different to the sense of dissatisfaction and unhappiness you get after an election result where they're voting on policies that cover everything from the nuclear deterrent to the number of toilets in primary schools, Johnny.
Well, no, because the
Well, yes, my friend.
You can make a difference, but you don't give me a chance to speak. Please give me a chance, please. Thank you. The point is, I understand the difference between a referendum and an election, but the point is, these people, these lefties, yes, they are upbringing by not giving a chance for everyone who thinks different than them to give them in these universities. And now you can see...
What are you talking about?
Let me explain you. Because
I haven't got all day.
No, but the point is...
These lefties in universities...
They have no respect for democracy. But I'll tell you why.
We've just been through that once. Of course they've got respect for democracy.
Right. Because if they would win and there would be a lie, they would say it's okay. They want a re-election because it's their way.
Number one, you keep saying you know the difference between a referendum and an election, and then you keep describing the referendum as an election, which it categorically wasn't. And number two, you can say, look, I know what the result was. I just think there's a feeling out there that a lot of people cast their vote on a slightly misunderstood premise. It's not. It's talking about lefties, all that sort of thing, Johnny. It's just a bit unhelpful at the moment. We should all be trying to get along. Dan's in Lambeth. Dan, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. I voted to remain, but I've reversed voted over the weekend.
I knew this. You see, this is why I love my job, because there must have been people like you out there, and I spent the whole weekend being bombarded by people on the opposite side of the coin. Tell me why. Where have you found optimism?
I genuinely think the EU is not going to exist in the next 20 or 30 years. I think you can...
As a result of our vote?
As a result of our vote, yeah, but that suggests that the analogy about the sinking ship wasn't far off.
Then why did you vote to stay on it then?
Well, because at the time I didn't believe that. So essentially, I think we might have made the right decision for the wrong reasons, is what I'm trying to say.
So the ship would have stayed afloat if we'd stayed. You voted to stay, and then now it's going to sink.
No, perhaps not. I think that the ship was sinking, and we can see that now because already I think that the French are going to follow. I think there's no way Greece are going to want to stay in, Portugal, Spain. So perhaps we were misguided, but that doesn't necessarily mean we've come to the wrong decision.
Right. Yes, no, I get that. But yeah, okay, so people might have cast their votes under slightly misunderstood premises, but that doesn't actually mean that the final product will be undesirable to them. I get that. Dredge is in Bristol. Dredge, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. I just wanted to say the problem is the referendum. It's in Switzerland. They had 3 votes on minimum wages in 2 years. In Ireland, they had several votes to come in. Because we're a parliamentary democracy, it's just the wrong media. I voted out because I was undecided, and I just wanted as a protest vote, so it was a mistake. Now we see all the ugly, terrible things which are happening, so I regret it. But I just think, it's always a close call. If it was a parliamentary democracy, they can change their mind. But, I can see a really strong case for actually voting again, because there's been quite many fools like me out there.
Bless your honesty, but it'd be very tough to sell for the reasons that I think Johnny and Stanmore was trying to make about somehow it feeling undemocratic to have 2 bites of the cherry. I would remind you, just for the sake of it, although obviously the fact that he's undergone a full volte-face is not exactly news. It's dog bites man, not man bites dog. But it was Mr. Farage who said if the result is 52-48, we should have another one. But of course he said that in expectation of it.
And also, the reason why I think it's not going to happen, this will be the first time when, council estates would be telling powerful people what to do. And I don't think, that'll probably give you some hope. That's not going to happen in this country, I don't think.
Yeah, well, you're right. That is hope, where hope is needed. 0345 6060 973. Grace is in Ealing. Grace, what would you like to say?
So many things. I myself actually abstained in the end. I wanted to vote leave because I don't know anywhere near enough about what the EU actually does.
No one told you, did they, during the course of that campaign?
I read quite a bit that suggested that its tariffs are really making life far harder for impoverished people outside of the EU, so African farmers and people like that. And I'm really concerned about them because they're living in far worse poverty than most people here in the UK. Not that there isn't poverty in the UK that needs to be addressed, but I was just so appalled by the racism of people like Farage that I just couldn't bring myself to vote leave either. So in the end, I abstained. I'm really concerned now that the Labour Party is falling apart and that people like Farage are so gaining in power and respect. I'm really concerned. We need a government that's going to do something about the wage disparity in this country, and we need to stop racists like Farage from getting more power.
Yes, he doesn't have any power at the moment.
I know.
In political terms,
if there's another general election.
But this is where I don't. Goodness knows I don't hold much affection for the fella, or at least for what he stands for. I don't know the man, but you are associating him with the kind of protests outside mosques, with the graffiti attacks on the Polish Cultural Centre, with the laminated...
No, I'm not assuming that.
Oh, good, because that's not fair.
It's statements that I've heard from him in the past. I specifically heard him say recently on the television, before the referendum, that we need to put British people first, and it's about time someone did. Yes. And I just think to myself, actually, people here in Britain, though there is definitely inequality which must be addressed, we still have a standard of living for the vast majority of us that is mostly way better than most of humanity. So I'm really concerned about people who are still starving around the world that we could actually be helping. And so for him to say let's scrap foreign aid and things like that just appalls me.
This is why having a binary question is so strange, having a yes and no question, because you find yourself on the same side in so many arguments with people that you'd be disagreeing with on so many others. And yet, for when it's a binary yes or no question, tick or cross, boo or hurrah, then things go strange. Grace, thank you. 10:58 is the time. I might crack on with this, actually. We've got to talk about Jeremy Corbyn, though. Which way round do you want to do it? What do you think? Should we crack on with this for a little bit longer and then shift more specifically onto Corbyn in the course of the next hour of the programme? And I would like to find out whether or not there's more feeling out there, more evidence out there of what Grace has just described, the sort of empowerment, the emboldenment. Is that a word? Oh, it is now. The emboldenment of people who do subscribe to the sort of politics of hate. The problem is there's a sense, and I don't know whether you're being a bit unkind on this or whether I am. Every time you talk about this, some people are determined to hear it as a suggestion that everybody who voted to leave the European Union is a fully paid up member of the National Front. You can't not have a conversation. If they're putting, bricks through windows, or they're putting letters through letterboxes and graffiti on walls, and a lot of people on the streets being told to go home. I I thought it was probably exaggerated until the former Sky News political editor Adam Bolton tweeted about 3 members of his family, because I know as a journalist he will not be in any way embellishing or exaggerating, who in the space of 24 hours all witnessed firsthand racial abuse on the streets of Britain. I would love to buy into the idea that we should just ignore it and it'll go away, but the people telling me to do that are the same, well, you know who they are. We'll keep one referendum ball in the air, and then we'll move over as well to Jeremy Corbyn, who's been told by the deputy leader Tom Watson, who came back, made an unscheduled return journey from Glastonbury yesterday as the Parliamentary Labour Party fell into epic disarray. He's been told by the deputy leader that he's likely to face a leadership challenge, according to a senior source. That story moving along while we are on air, actually. That story likely also to see an addition to the list of shadow ministers who've already resigned. It's an astonishing number of people who've gone, and it's important to remember that they were appointed by Jeremy Corbyn because presumably he used his skill and judgment to appoint the best people for all of those jobs. As the news bulletins just reported, there is grave concern about an apparent increase, an apparent upsurge in incidents of what I suppose we could call race hate. When charges are brought, obviously situations shift slightly in terms of what we can talk about, but there were protests outside mosques before we voted to leave the European Union. It doesn't necessarily follow that the decision to do so has empowered people. Are you looking for logic or intelligence? You're not going to find much, because membership of the European Union has absolutely diddly squat to do with mosques and British Muslims, but that conflation of the two maybe suggests we should be worried. And near me as well, there's a big Polish community where I live. I think there always has been, actually. It's the same in Kidderminster where I grew up. And guess who else grew up in Kidderminster? Tom Watson. Deputy leader of the Labour Party, about 12 doors down. Mums and mates. But I digress slightly. Big Polish community there, big Polish community near me. And the Polish Cultural Centre on King Street in Hammersmith, I'd spent years thinking it was the embassy. In fact, it was one of you that corrected me, because I remember saying on air once, I don't understand why the Polish embassy's near me. All the other embassies are on that lovely little bit of Kensington and Holland Park. But the Polish, and it's not, it's a cultural centre that was sort of founded almost as a celebration of Polish integration into this country in the early 1960s, and as a recognition of the role played by Polish Spitfire pilots during the Second World War. And you know who trained a lot of those Polish Spitfire pilots? Professor Howell's granddad, General Sosabowski, played in the film by Gene Hackman. Sorry, if you're not a regular listener to the programme, you'll be wondering what the hell is going on, but there's quite a lot of lovely threads to tie together there. Saeed Avasi and a number of other people, the Huffington Post have put together a big collection of people taking to social media and doing this under the Brexit banner, indulging in some pretty grim commentary, some pretty grim abuse, which I think can only really be described as racist. But it might just blow over. I'm worried. I'm not going to lie to you. I am worried that there is an emboldening of people who have felt that their views had no place in the mainstream, now feel that maybe they do. But I don't think that started on Friday. I think that started when journalists realised that complaining about political correctness would get them a lot of attention. And then when politicians joined in, it became pretty hard to argue against the notion that one of the loudest and most clamorous perspectives in British politics had become the idea that there's something wrong with telling people not to be offensive. It's political correctness gone mad. It's not really. I mean, it's good manners. And if you want to say something offensive, then I'm allowed to ask you questions about why you think that. And if you end up looking stupid, don't get cross with me, get cross with the people that told you the lies. Sadly, humanity doesn't really work like that. So I want stories, actually, and I want them to be first-hand. We'll do some commentary as well, because obviously I'm not going to have people ringing in to share their stories straight away. You didn't know what I was going to ask you. But I've got some myself. One involving a Polish woman on a bus being told to get off and go home, which is very unattractive and was directly linked to Brexit, because the rhetoric was, we voted for you to leave. And that's not very nice for anybody. The primary school where the graffiti on the toilet wall in the girls' toilet named a pupil and said, go back to Romania, we voted leave. You have to have this conversation, and I will repeat at regular intervals, it in no way means that everybody who voted to leave the European Union would dream in a bazillion years of endorsing this sort of behaviour. But you can't ignore the fact that you were on the same side, and that some people will therefore argue, accuse you of being part of this process of empowerment and emboldening. You can argue back. It's a liberal democracy that we live in for the time being, so you can argue back with them. But I don't know that it is going to be very easy if people are actively saying, we voted leave, therefore I'm doing something a bit racist today, that you can extricate yourself entirely from, if not cooperation, then maybe some sort of complacency. Again, as with a lot of subjects that we've done at the moment, I'd really like to be wrong, but the numbers seem to me to be too big to attack. And I've also got to cite once again, and poor fellow's going to wonder what he's done to deserve all this attention from me, but Adam Bolton at Sky News, when he tweeted last night that 3 members of his family had witnessed first-hand verbal racist abuse on the streets, referencing the referendum result, I just found myself thinking, well, if he's doing this and if he's tweeting it and putting it out publicly, this is a lot more than just the usual suspects using anecdotes to if you like, fan the flames of fear. 03456060973. Sheila had a woman on Friday, I think, already after the result, didn't she? An Asian woman rang into Sheila Fogarty and said she was told in the supermarket by an elderly white man, we've got our country back. Obviously the implication was that she shouldn't be there anymore. That's just scary, but you've heard this rhetoric before. It can't be a massive shock, can it? Emma is in Ripley in Derbyshire. Emma, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I think this racist and xenophobia is going to be the lasting divide in this country. And the main reason is because it's being excused and not condemned. And I'm so angry and sad that everyone I know has made excuses for it and said that it's bitter Remain campaigners making it all up, not distancing themselves from it, not saying it's wrong, just outright excusing it. And I was told the worst thing we can do is believe any of it. And I'm so angry.
Well, let me try and find a silver lining to that position for you. And we'll call that silver lining denial, which means that they do find it wrong and disgusting, which is why they're trying to persuade themselves that it's not true. Surely it would be worse if they were saying, yay, and cheering it along. So I know what you're saying to me, and I happen to agree with most of it, but sometimes I like to look at what the other fella's doing and try to work out why. And the ones who are in denial about it, they're probably the good guys, aren't they?
Well, I think these people who are going to be very vocal and say, I'm not racist, I'm not xenophobic, I didn't vote for immigration, if they're not also being as vocal to say, I think the racism is disgusting and it is not what I voted for, then I think they're equally to blame by letting it go on by.
And how do you, I don't want to fall into the trap that you've just described your friends and family being in, but how do you know it's true? How do you know there has been an upsurge?
No, I don't. But I think in these cases it's got to be the benefit of the doubt. We should not be dismissing it straight away, instantly, as a smear campaign. We've got to consider it all surely, and more so because we know the hard right voted. We know that they campaigned as hard as anybody, so we know they exist and we know it's happening. So then to deny that maybe they are going to continue behaving like that afterwards, I find absolutely ridiculous, shameful, and I'm so disappointed.
Oh, I can tell. There's so much emotion around at the moment, and I'm certainly not going to join the chorus of people saying that you don't have the right to express your feelings, you should shut up and move on, or you should be quiet and act. No, this is what I'm here for. You've got a loud hailer on this programme. Everybody has, even people who argue the opposite of what you argue. But I guess the people, here's one in early, this kind of behaviour is totally wrong. I voted to leave the EU, but I hate this. We're a multicultural society and we should respect each other. I guess they're not going to get a very big platform to make this point.
They've got the same platform as they have by publicly saying that they're not racist and sneering at those who suggest so. They've got a loud enough voice to defend themselves, but they've not got a loud enough voice to defend everybody else, and I don't understand it. And I view so many people differently after this weekend. It absolutely saddens me that people I'm friends with are behaving like this. I see them differently, and if they divide, I'm going to be partly responsible for the divide, to be honest, because I don't want anything to do with them anymore. So,
well, that's sad. isn't it? Because you're talking about people you know well, but actually on social media, I would be surprised if anybody listening to this didn't recognise what you have just said, and it's hard to know how things do rejoin. I mean, unfriending and unfollowing and all this sort of thing. You don't do it because people voted to leave.
No.
You do it because they're denying any responsibility whatsoever for the apparent emboldening and empowering of the people.
Because of excusing behaviour. Because they are actively making excuses. When they say, don't believe this, the Remain campaign's made it up. They are actively excusing the behaviour, and that's what I don't like. And I won't unfriend, and I probably won't unfollow, but I absolutely see them in a different light, and they've definitely lost respect for me. I
hear you. No, I hear you, Emma. And again, I'm sure you'll join me in saying I hope your mates are right and that it is all made up and exaggerated. But unfortunately, the weight of evidence is against them and indeed against us. You can truly see it everywhere. It's that stupid Winnie the Pooh thing that's made me cross, saying, can't we still be friends? And you just want to say, well, hang on a minute. If you really have just contributed to a huge upswell in social division, if you really have just made my little girl's Polish and Albanian friends frightened, then no. I hope we can still be friends. But right now, I need a bit more space, actually, before you start sending me stupid AA Milne postcards. Sophia is in Crystal Palace. Sophia, what would you like to say? And I just remind everybody else, the phones are full, but I'm trying to free up some phone lines for actual accounts and stories as much as analyses and opinions. 0345 606 0973. Sophia, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Firstly, I'd like to say hear to the last caller.
Yes.
And it's so sad. I mean, we've all witnessed a really quite nasty campaign where immigration was being discussed in a really dangerous and vile way, using seriously horrible rhetoric and, in Farage's case, exceptionally divisive imagery. And really what I'd like to say is that you can't give people the apparatus and the language to hit in a cynical attempt to affect the potential outcome of a referendum and then expect them to fall back into a lull of apathy. So I think that our society has changed for the worse for the foreseeable future.
Because you can't put the genie back in the bottle, however much Boris Johnson might be trying to backtrack on things. The bottom line is that people who have felt for 30 years that they can't say publicly what they hold in their heart now feel that they can.
They can, and I mean, this is the kind of thing that actually Yanis Varoufakis and others warned us of in the case of the UK leaving the EU. And in fact, even in this extremely multicultural part of South London, where there is great social cohesion, I've seen people shouting at people in a Portuguese restaurant, "We voted you out." In this part of London. I came to London 20 years ago from Belfast, which incidentally, if Northern Ireland is taking a more moderate view, England's got a serious problem. But that's besides the point.
Well, Ian Paisley Jr. was suggesting people get a Republic passport at the week. I mean, you think you're down the rabbit hole and then you find a whole new tunnel.
There aren't many advantages to being born in Belfast, but dual citizenship is becoming one of them.
Yes.
But
2.5 million applications last week, apparently. The Irish Embassy, I think the website crashed. So many people were trying to get hold of an Irish passport.
Yeah, Belfast has run out of application forms as well. But, I came to London 20 years ago from what was not a multicultural society. People didn't want to move to Northern Ireland for very obvious reasons. And London seemed like this great big open world full of cultural experiences. I was meeting people from all over the world, hearing all sorts of different languages and reveling in this real feeling of cohesion. And I spoke to a friend who's from Hong Kong at the weekend, who said for the first time in 14 years in London, she has felt unwelcome. And that is an appalling legacy of a cynical campaign. I don't blame the people who voted leave. I voted to remain unashamedly. And I don't blame those people who voted to leave, but I do blame Farage, and I do blame Johnson, and I do blame their rhetoric and their campaign.
Because they appear just to push the envelope of acceptability a little further, which means the people who are already further along the road than they are move a little bit further as well.
Absolutely, and presenting immigration as a cause of inequality in this country is actually a lie. The fact is that
it'd be true in some areas. This is the challenge the country faces. Let alone the Labour Party or the Conservative Party. The challenge the country faces, the real riddle, is why the big cities, in particular London, most obviously London, where immigration is huge, are the least troubled by it. And the answer to that is still elusive. I've always presumed that it is people who are more frightened by the perception than the reality. Do you remember on Friday we spoke to a fellow who ended up arguing with regard to immigration? He ended up arguing that we've got too few houses in this country but too many builders. And when you find yourself coming up against that logic, you do wonder whether you're wasting your time looking for a rational analysis of why an area like London, where immigration is among the highest in the developed world, certainly in the Western world, is the area least spooked by it. And remember, the referendum vote was not a vote in which most of those people could take part. So the old argument with by-elections and local elections that, oh yeah, but all the immigrants have voted in a way that is not anti-immigrant, doesn't hold in the referendum, weirdly. 12:18 is the time. Sophia, thank you. Remember, if you're waiting to contribute, you can grab the phone line that Sophia has just vacated by dialing the usual number. What have you witnessed? Actually witnessed? There's a lot of footage coming in, actually, people. Jubilee train at Stratford Station in East London. A Mirror has got that footage. That's one of the advantages, I suppose, of the tyranny of smartphones, isn't it? Is that people have actually got studio quality recording equipment in their back pocket. Still hope it doesn't get used much. Independent reporting, so I haven't seen the data yet, but over 1 million people now regretting their vote to leave the European Union. Make of that what you will, but remember, if people voted because they believed X, and after the vote it's turned out that X was not true, they deserve a flipping voice. They're allowed to be aggrieved. People who voted to remain and just saw that it didn't go their way, they're allowed a voice as well, but they don't deserve quite as much attention as people who actually feel duped. I can't keep up now. We've got 2 more resignations from the shadow cabinet. We've got Angela Eagle, who has just gone, and who was the other one? And another fella, which means there's now nobody left. It's the Marie Celeste. John Healey. Was he work and pension? Housing, I beg your pardon. It's impossible to keep up. I'm supposed to know this stuff. So that's 2 more. And the Huffington Post is reporting Chris Bryant's claims yesterday that Jeremy Corbyn has refused to confirm that he actually voted to remain in the European Union, which may well see many people say, well, that shows he's in touch with the northern powerhouses, with the northern constituencies, until you remember. And this is why the last hour frustrated me so much. Well, look, even if he is anti-EU, that shows he's in touch with all those workers. He spoke about it being ridiculous to have any limits on immigration. So to claim that he's closer to the grievances of people who voted to leave the European Union largely because of immigration policy is about as close to bonkers as it's possible to be. 23 minutes after 12 is the time. Reports of racial tension and indeed arrests made as well. A lot of it is true. It doesn't mean, A, that you are definitely seeing a result of the Brexit vote, even if people are citing and referencing Brexit when being a bit racist or being unpleasant, being rude. But it doesn't mean the opposite either. And I think we can all agree that we will not struggle, you and I, we will not struggle to find real examples that resist any suggestion that it's all being invented to stoke up anti-leave sentiment. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. Dorian is in Windsor. Dorian, what would you like to say?
Hi there. Yeah, it's just a very stupid thing. On Saturday, I was queuing on the supermarket to pay my stuff.
Yes.
And I got a very stupid insult saying, I clearly look like, I'm a foreigner because I'm not blonde and blue eyes. But
nor am I, to be fair. Where are you from, Dorian?
I'm from Albania.
Okay. So you have quite a Slavic look, do you? You're quite okay.
More Turkish, probably.
Yes. Okay.
And and I was invited to leave because the person wouldn't leave. And I just wanted to take maybe 30 seconds to tell the history of my life. Right, I've immigrated in Italy 26 years ago, just like the Syrians, thrown in the sea and made my life up. So I've been studying hard, I got a degree with maximum scores. I got the Italian citizenship as well.
Yes.
I've been working for some major companies. I've been living in Italy for 13 years, in Germany for 1, Switzerland for 3 years, UK is now 5 years. And I thought, UK really could be my home because it's a very multicultural country and nobody feels a foreigner, right, in this country. And, I'm just surprised. How can it turn from one day to the other? It's just unbelievable. I mean, you guys have taught us what globalization is. You have taught us, what democracy is. You have been the big brothers of Europe. Europe was being invaded by Germans or other dictators, and UK was coming to rescue everybody. So what's going on? I mean, I don't understand this regression, and ultimately it's just really unfortunate because it's not going to benefit anybody.
That's the point you would have liked to make to the person in the supermarket queue. If Dorian, if you packed your bags tomorrow and went back to Italy or Germany or even Albania, you really are a global citizen, aren't you? And no wonder you feel so baffled by what's going on. It's almost the polar opposite of everything that your life represents. But if you packed your bags and went back to whatever country you went back to, how would their life be improved in any way? The person that abused you in the supermarket?
My life, definitely would be different because I won't be abused in a supermarket.
No, but how would his life improve? How would his life be better if you got on a boat tomorrow?
Honestly, I think it's going to worsen because I have paid, I think, around 200,000 taxes in over 5 years in United Kingdom, and I bring know-how that is very limited. So my skills are in a particular area that there is probably around 300 individuals in the whole world that know that kind of stuff. So, I have no problem really to work anywhere else I want in the world. Of course, not huge salaries, but I can find that job just because my skills are so particular. So I think it's not going to benefit, and it's not because, Dorian is so intelligent. Who cares about Dorian? I think there is just so many highly skilled people coming from Europe that are just bringing wealth and, prosperity to this country.
And I suppose the politicians will say, and they're the ones we want to welcome. That's what controlled immigration will look like. But the kind of people that abuse you in supermarket queues and a deeply troubling number of other people getting in touch with the programme don't really see the nuance involved in that. Especially, I could argue, you could take it further. Someone like Dorian is earning really good money and no doubt living a life that reflects that fact. This notion of an Australian-style point system is designed to bring in people like that, but history also suggests that when immigrants are doing really, really well, that causes resentment among precisely the constituency that you could argue had been so cynically appealed to over the course of the last few weeks. I said I'd have to repeat this repeatedly, and I will. This is in no way I've got friends and I've got family members who voted to leave the European Union, and I can categorically state that they are as troubled and as disgusted as I am by these outbreaks of racism. So there is no attempt here to conflate leaving the European Union with a support of the kind of treatment that Dorian's just described. But I don't think you get a free pass on empowering these people because they've been empowered by the vote that you cast. I think, and again, I stress for the zillionth time, you're perfectly entitled to ring up and disagree with me. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Stories, things that have actually happened to you. And Dorian, is Dorian still there? Is that good? Just know, Dorian, that a lot of people getting in touch to stress just how opposite their position is on your presence in our country. 0345 6060 973. It's 12:30. It's hard to keep up, isn't it? But as I see it, you've got John Healey has gone, Angela Eagle has gone, Owen Smith and Lisa Nandy have gone today. Hilary Benn got sacked the other night. Heidi Alexander, Lucy Powell, Carl Turner have all gone. So that's a Health Secretary, an Education Secretary and an Attorney General. Kerry McCarthy and Lillian Greenwood, Transport and Environment. Ian Murray, Vernon Coker. Vernon Coker is Northern Ireland Secretary. We need someone strong in Northern Ireland, either in shadow cabinet or actual cabinet. Theresa Villas, not exactly restoring or engendering a huge amount of confidence among people who live there. They're really scared about what's going to happen to that border. And you know, something else that occurred to me at the week, and I'm sure it occurred to you as well. So if Scotland do have another crack at independence and achieve it, what's that border going to look like? You got the Mayor of Calais and calling for the border checks in France to be moved back to Britain. Central government on the record in Paris saying that won't happen, but I can tell you now there's some senior politicians in France speaking publicly about the need for it. So you could have that pushed back to Britain. You could have some sort of border in place. It won't be Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall would give a couple of hundred square miles to Scotland that's currently English, but you know, some latter-day equivalent of Hadrian's Wall, and then a rebuilding of the borders in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, between the Republic and Northern Ireland. And then that little cautious suggestion that a lot of votes might have been cast without a clear picture just begins to assume a little bit more weight. I haven't finished either. Seema Malhotra's gone. Gloria De Piero has gone. Lord Falconer, who really was a Blairite, the only really fully paid up Blairite in the cabinet, I think. Shadow Justice Secretary, he's gone. Chris Bryant, Steve Reid, Stephen Kinnock, Diana Johnson, Anna Turley, Toby Perkins and Chris Matheson have all resigned from the shadow cabinet, with the exception of Hilary Benn, of course, who got sacked. Jeremy Corbyn's still there, but it's 12:34 and the clock is ticking. Matt is in Reading to steer us back to the conversation about the fears regarding an upsurge in racist incidents post-Brexit. Matt, what would you like to say?
Well, the thing is, I haven't seen any specific incidents. But what I have seen on Facebook and various other social media is something, you know, that has alarmed me quite a lot. It's people who said, yeah, I did leave. I did vote to leave. Yeah, I am worried about immigration. Shoot me. You know, they're sort of defensive.
Yes.
And then they're sort of saying things like, it's right that we should look after our own first. Before, I've no problem with immigration. I've no problem with aid and looking after other people, but we should always look after our own first. And the thing that's very insidious, that sort of thing, and it grows. And the problem,
no kidding.
The problem that I have with that is that if we think back for a minute, and this is really alarmist, and I apologise in advance for it, but if we think back to 1930s Germany, we had a situation where the people were fed up with austerity and being poor and all the rest of it. And this young guy came along and he started preaching a certain type of rhetoric, and people gradually took up the message. And you mentioned, what prompted me to call you was you mentioned to a caller earlier about people, her friends and things, probably do feel deep down that it's wrong, but they're in denial. The people that she was saying were excusing it and stuff. And that's what happened in Germany. And the vast majority of the German people didn't send Jewish people to the gas chambers. You know, they sort of suspected, and they saw what the Hitler Youth and, you know, the SA and things were doing, and the Gestapo and all the rest of it, and they were often in fear and frightened and so on and so forth. But the vast majority of them tried to just get on with their lives and ignore what was going on. When they saw a Jewish person being beaten in the street, they turned their backs and ignored it. Oh, well, it's just hotheads. You know, it's only a minority. And before you knew it, the minority became so powerful that they ended up being able to take control of the country, invade Poland, and cause a war in Europe, the likes of which we've never seen. And also massacre 5 million Jews into the bargain. I'm not saying that we could go that far in 21st century Britain, but it's people like the EDL and Britain First, you know, that they are the type of parties that will whip up and use this fear of immigrants, and especially now they'll feel they have a mandate for it.
And the absence of logic is best probably explained by the Islamic element to this, as if somehow a vote to leave the European Union has empowered people to
get rid of the Muslims.
Yeah, I actually heard someone say that on the telly. Now that's the media's fault, right? That's you can. I mean, even if you include social media and those strange groups you mentioned, the media has added to that conflation. The media has added the front of the Daily Mail last week, which had refugees getting out the back of a van, and somehow they wrote in the copy that they'd come from Europe. They had to withdraw the story the next day because it was simply not true. But there's no earthly way that doesn't impact on people.
No, exactly, and it is terrifying because something like this, it's very subversive. It won't in many cases it won't rear its head overtly, and many people will say, yeah, well, I did vote Leave, and I am worried about immigration. I don't want anybody to get hurt though, and I'm sure it doesn't. I'm sure the vast majority of us don't, and I'm sure that's probably true. But the point that every time that incidents, I've now taken it upon myself. Every time I find something about this, I check what's been said, and I check the source, The Guardian or whatever, and it gets shared to Facebook. Yes, I know I'm going to annoy some of my friends and family who voted to leave, but I think it is our duty to keep the attention on the issue of racially motivated attacks as much as possible, because it's something that we have to keep it in the public consciousness. Otherwise, it will get swept under the carpet.
I'm closer to your position than the opposite position, but I do worry that you slightly skew the reality by posting everything. Do you see what I mean? It's not something you did prior. It's not something you did prior to the referendum.
No, I appreciate that, and I do understand that. But on the other hand, I mean, it's kind of like, the lesser of two evils in a sense, because if you don't share what you know, and you don't keep people's attention on the issue of racially motivated attacks against Polish people and Romanians and Latvians and or Germans and French people and whatever, then people will kind of go, oh, it's all settled down now. The economy is bouncing back and everybody panics over nothing and it's all great. This could become a really serious underground problem unless people's attention is kept on it.
Yes, that's the thing, isn't it? The more attention you keep on it, arguably, the more fires you fight. But some people will claim that by talking about it or focusing upon it or reporting it, you fuel the fires. I can't help thinking that trouble is a lot less likely to go away if you look in the opposite direction than it is if you try to stare it down. But you're entitled to disagree with Matt and indeed with me. 12:39 is the time. Yanni is in Clapham. Yanni, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. First of all, avid listener. Love your show.
Good man. Good start. Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it now, Yanni. Don't spoil it now.
No, I won't. First of all, I just want to lay basic. I'm a son of an immigrant. My dad's Greek, but my mother is English and Scottish. And I've been brought up to understand that we live in Great Britain, which is the home of democracy, albeit the Greeks invented it. But
they gave it to rich men, Yanni. I think you'll find that universal suffrage was a British enthusiasm.
I know, but we're going back a few.
We are a few millennia.
All I've seen since Thursday's vote or Friday's vote is all these left-wing people saying, "How dare you? You're so racist, so xenophobic, etc." I believe in democracy. On Thursday and Friday was a democratic vote, and they lost, and they're not happy, and they're throwing their toys out the pram. But they want to go live under a European law, which is controlling individual and unique European countries that has a vast history. And they're trying to contain everyone, telling us what to do and put us all mixed together when, let's get one thing straight, it's not working. But what we want to do it the British way is like how that guy said earlier from Albania. We are the big brothers, basically, in Europe. And we will show everyone how democratic party and democratic society works. And we will be great again. It will take time, but I am willing.
Even without Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Scotland, if they go by themselves, they'll collapse and they'll become calling back within a couple of years.
But the Scottish nationalists sound just like you when they talk about how they'll be much better off on their own and we'll show the world and da-da-da-da-da.
Well, good on them. If the Scottish want people be on their own, then good on them. Good on them. I say go for it. If the Irish want to become Republicans again, good on them.
We won't be Great Britain anymore. We'll have to come up with a new name, like Little Britain.
All right.
We'll have to pay Matt Lucas. We'll have to pay Matt Lucas a royalty.
But James, look what happened. We're so little, but yet we decided to leave the EU. We've shaken the whole world. The whole world has suddenly woken up and gone, oh crap!
Because most of them think we've made a terrible mistake.
Yeah, well, they're going to be wrong.
I hope so. I'll buy what you're on. Seriously, I really will. But here's the thing: how do we distinguish between people like? I mean, I presume all these racist attacks, all of the graffiti, the schools.
My family.
Yeah, I mean, it makes your skin crawl, right? And yet you are.
It makes me laugh.
What do you mean?
Because they are some of the most racist people going. They're always moaning about Turks, how they invaded Greece,
No, I didn't mean that. I mean the stuff we're reading about now. Children being, primary schools with "Go Home Polish" vermin cards being handed out. The graffiti on the Polish centre.
These people are idiots.
Yeah. So how do we distinguish? Because this is the problem.
Literally all my life, people with my name saying, "Oh, God, where's that from?" I'm say, "Well, I'm Greek, mate, but my voice, I don't speak Greek. I am English. I don't care. I get on with it. But if you let it get to you, you're gonna. Do you know the old saying?
Hang on a minute.
The old saying, don't fix something that's not broken. Well, the EU is broken, and we will fix it.
Well, we won't fix it. We won't be in it, but it might have to. We could fix. Hang on. What? Yanni, skase, vlaka, and daxi.
Yeah.
Ella.
Go on.
Perimene, ligo, ne?
Well, like I said, I don't speak Greek. I know the basics, and one of them's a hand gesture.
All right. Yeah, well, we all know that one. Probably just as well you don't speak Greek. You have no idea what I just called you. Now, how do we distinguish between people like you who find this anti-Polish upsurge that we're hearing about just as repellent as everybody else does, and yet you feel that you've been called a racist for voting to leave? Because I've got a lot of. I mean, look, I'm not going to lose too much sleep about the usual suspects who bombard me daily with nonsense. But there are. I've said it 10 times on the programme now. I've got family members and friends who voted to leave. I know they are not racist, but you can't separate yourself from the fact that people think that this leave vote. And you've heard the callers, the Albanian gentleman, Dorian, describing how, when are you going back to your country? We voted for you to leave. So how does someone on the outside make the distinction between, if you like, good leavers and racist leavers?
But obviously, that's the fine details of things.
It's quite important.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. But I look at it as my job. I'm going to building sites, and I'm not going to. I'm turning up to massive building sites, and there's not one English-speaking fella there. There's no harm. We need immigration. We need that. Immigration is what made Britain what it is. However, the EU is trying to tell us we must do this, we must do that.
No, you're not answering. I get that. I understand that. I understand the anger about the EU. I understand your position on the European Union, and I understand it's devoid of any sort of racist subtext. But it doesn't answer the question. You can call it fine detail if you like. It's probably the most important question on a social level facing the country at the moment. Social as opposed to more formally political is how you make these distinctions. How you make these distinctions between people. People who are quiet and not that shocked by what's gone on. People who are deeply disturbed, people who feel shame and guilt at the way they voted because of what that vote has allowed other people to feel. These are really, really important, nuanced distinctions. But as I said to you a million times last week, when you present the public with a binary question, nuance, sophistication and deep thought goes out of the window on both sides. That's the thing about binary yes or no questions that address incredibly complex issues. Is Yanni still there? I'm going to try out one word on him. Yanni?
Yeah.
Efaristopoli.
Yeah, nice one, mate.
Oh, come on, Jan. It's described. You're flipping out. I had a Greek girlfriend at university, and I'm practically bilingual compared to you.
Like I said, I was born and raised in South London. I was
born and raised in Kidderminster, mate. He's hardly Thessaloniki. I can't call in, James, because I'm really upset and stressed at the moment. I'm actually British, a mixed race between Middle Eastern and European backgrounds. My 85-year-old neighbour, with whom we regularly enjoy meals, has even got involved in this casual racism you describe. He said he was voting out because of immigrants. I asked if he had issues with my existence, as I am second generation, and he said, well, you're here now, so there's not much we can do about it. I have an Arabic surname, and I'm really afraid of how a huge chunk of the population will view me, even though I'm British. Oh, also, I have seen people trying to equate them being called racist because they support UKIP or whatever. My fear of giving my surname or my British Chinese friend being told to go home, as she was last week, it's so unbelievably misguided and upsetting. I'm in IT with a skill that is really undersupplied here, so I'm fortunate to be able to get paid a six-figure salary, but I'm currently looking for a contract outside of the UK, as I think it would be a better option until things calm down and or blow over. I really fear that there might be a huge brain drain from this country on the back of this attitude, even though it is the minority, brackets apparently, all this talk of an Australian system. Which foreigner would want to come somewhere that is viewed as outwardly xenophobic? I'd rather not give my name, as I'm afraid that some of your less pleasant listeners might dig me out and find me and abuse me on Twitter. 12:50 is the time. Sam is in Wood Green. Sam, what would you like to say?
I've been here all my life. I was born here. My parents came here in the 60s, along with a lot of other people from, they kicked out from Uganda with Idi Amin, etc.
Can I stop you there, right there? Have you ever said that before? Have you ever felt the need to say to anyone that you were born here?
Recently, yes. not so much before. I mean, I was born in the 70s. I had racism then, walking down the street, not knowing what it meant. And we had it in the 80s. My dad owned shops, and we had racism then when we opened a new shop. And then it all but went sort of in the 90s. And
damned political correctness, eh?
Something like that. But it all went. And it's just recently, as you said, I've had the need to say that. And mainly because I've got 2 young children, 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And the example I'm going to set is we went shopping and we're waiting for a lift. The doors open. They ran in to press the buttons, as they often do. And I sort of gave that look that a parent can give that shows disapproval. So they came back out. And I told them, I moved to the lady next to me who'd been waiting, an elderly lady, go in. You were here first, without saying a word. And we went in and we all stood in the lift. And she's making comments about how, this is what happens when you let people come in the country and they've got no respect. And I said nothing. When the doors opened, my children ran out. I did say to her, I was born here, my children were born here, we've lived here all our lives. You haven't let us in as such, and they've done nothing wrong. They're just excitable children, so I'm sorry if they offended you. And she just looked at me as if, to say, I don't care. I just sat there thinking, this issue with the way the referendum's gone, it doesn't mean that people who voted leave are racist. It's just, I think it legitimizes those who had those thoughts in the first place and kept them under wraps.
How old are your children?
3 and 5. They don't know. They're completely oblivious to it. And I don't want them to have gone through what I've gone through.
No.
But it is a step back that society's taken. And that's not the only incident they've had. My ex-wife had them at the doctor's, and the term gorilla was used in regards to the fact that they were waiting and my children were there talking a little loudly. And the fact that they had to wait in longer queues, etc., because of them. And a complaint was made. But that's not, it's happening more and more often. I thought it was all but gone. My parents have always worried about it when they brought us up. They've always made us aware of it and just said to ignore it. I didn't think my children would have to be given the same lessons.
And it would appear that they do, although I hope it doesn't sound glib when I say, maybe the tide will go back out again now that the debate is over, the referendum result is in.
I hope so. I hope they never... like I said, it's a very small amount of people it happens with. The majority of people I meet, I never get it. But even then, my girlfriend has had the similar thing when she tells someone she's dating someone who's Indian. They've asked questions about, does he speak the language properly? And she's saying, well, he was born here. And I said, yes, but he's from India, so does he speak properly? I think, well, yes, he was born here. He doesn't know anything else. It's an odd thing to have to sort of make these comments to almost justify.
Well, that's why I stopped you at the outset, because something sort of snapped inside me when I just detected from your tone that you now on the radio in your country where you were born feel the need to stress that you were born here, and that doesn't really help either, because the people that you feel might soften their attitude to you if they knew that you were born here won't, will they? Because it's your skin colour that they're reacting to, not your birth certificate.
Absolutely. It makes no difference what I say or what I do. It's just the judgment is there from the outset. I mean, my children being 3 and 5, there's no way they could be any sort of harm to anyone. They speak English better than most at their age. They're doing fantastically well in school, and you wouldn't know. I mean, they can barely speak my language. They didn't speak my language very well because I haven't really taught it to them. And to be honest, most of the time we converse in English.
Yes, of course.
So it just seems very odd that they have to...
And that's why I'm glad you were listening today, because we have to have this conversation, however much concern there might be that by shining a light on it you somehow feed it. I reject that completely. It's stories like that. It's Sam's little kids in a lift with a woman who, again, I would say, once again, that distinction you have to make between people that sell lies and people who believe them is crucial, but it's getting harder and harder to do because the lies are going unchallenged. Sam, thank you. Paul's in Harrow. Paul, what made you pick up the phone?
James, we've spoken quite a bit in the past, but yesterday was just a night. Well, not a nightmare. I just couldn't believe what I was in Sainsbury's, and the way I look, I'm like, if I wore a white t-shirt, shorts, and braces, I'll look like the perfect poster boy for the NF. Right?
It's the braces are the final touch, the cherry on the icing on the cake.
I look like a bulldog chewing a wasp, right? And if I stand still in a salsa club when I'm waiting to dance with a lady, I look missing. I can't help it, it's just who I am. But I walk through places and I smile and I nod at people, sure. So good morning, everything else, because I like being nice. It's nice to be nice. So I'm standing in the queue with my wife at Sainsbury's yesterday morning, yesterday midday, and I nodded at this bloke who was just finished doing his shopping, and he nodded back and smiled. And he walked through a load of people, came up to me and goes, "Hi." He goes, do you know why there's so many Chinese stroke chinks in Harrow? And I went, hold on, I may look like this, but I'm not. Shut up, turn round and jog on. Right?
Yeah.
And I said it in a bit more colourful words than
Sure.
that. And I could not believe... And the thing is...
Well, we don't know. I have to say, I have to remind you at this point that there's no reason for believing that that's linked to what happened last week.
Oh, there is no way on God's earth anyone in the middle of Sainsbury's is going to walk through a load of people and just say that without him feeling the benefit of, you know, everyone's doing what they're doing. I can't believe it. I would not believe it. Anyone would have the balls to turn around and do that. Okay? I just could not believe it. Like, I've had a couple of things in the last couple of years. I got my chimney sweep.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, I was in this really wealthy man's house sweeping his chimney. I went to sweep his mum's house just down the road with the gardener. I'm sweeping the chimney and the gardener turns around and said, "Are you going to put a spook up there?" He didn't know my granddaughter is mixed race, and it took every single bone in my body to stop squashing him. You know, but it is underlying. Like, the way I look, I can't help it, right?
You become like a magnet for it.
But the thing is, I go into builders' sites and I go everywhere else. All right?
Yeah.
And it is underlying. And what's actually happened now, because it's come out in the way it's done, people think they can get away with saying what they think. And it's wrong.
And it can't be the responsibility of people who voted the other way to deal with this problem. It surely has to be a greater responsibility for the people who have provided the empowerment. Paul, we'll talk again, hopefully in slightly happier circumstances. Suzanne, I've only got a minute, but I want to squeeze you in because you're in Lincolnshire, which of course was one of the great focal points of the immigration issue in the referendum debate. What do you want to tell us?
All I wanted to say is that I visit all of these factories where all these immigrants work in Lincolnshire on a daily basis. I find them nothing but polite and just hard-working individuals. Now, they feel an undercurrent. Now, they feel like they're not welcome in our country. And I couldn't, I'm just absolutely gutted that they feel that way, because I've worked with these people. They've become my friends. And for them to feel that way, I think it's just awful, to be honest. And when they all, if all of them decided they were to leave the UK, who's going to do those jobs? Because I can tell you now, 95% of all of them are European, from Poland or Lithuania. I can't see many British stepping into the roles that they're doing and doing.
No, but that leads us to the observation in the run-up to the referendum about how it would be worth it to suffer a bit economically as long as we could do more about immigration. And maybe they'd pass whatever tests it is that we're going to put in place. You never know. The thing that amuses me, Susanna, you reminded me of it actually, is when you go there, oh, it's all right for the middle classes with their cleaners and their babysitters and their nannies. They've all benefited from immigration. Which the logical conclusion is that you're cross because you're not cleaning my house. Okay, good luck with that.